tape. So previous slides, which one?
We talked about absorptive state, post-absorptive state, I honestly, I didn't understand what exactly you have to know from that part of this chapter.
What's post-absorptive? Well, first of all, what's the absorptive state?
Absorptive and when we digest.
Right, and this is on page 934 in the textbook. So basically, the definition of post-absorptive is after we have done what?
We ingest food and then we digest it and then we absorb it.
Correct. So post-absorptively, after we absorb the nutrients from the food that we ate, metabolism still goes on, right? So basically this is showing us some of the different things that go on with the nutrients we absorb from the digestive process. So we have things like protein metabolism. We're going to make proteins making muscle. We take glycogen and create glycogen from the extra carbohydrate molecules. So these are just some of the steps of the building blocks we then use to make the molecules that we need for us to function properly.
I think what I need to know, that do we need to know this diagram? Because it's a little complicated, because the absorbed monosaccharide, they go to liver and then they convert it to glucose, and then from glucose,
from
liver,
glycogen.
they go to fat, adipose tissue, and then by
That's only if we have extra carbo. That's only if we have extras.
this is how chapter goes. Like it's in detail.
I know, but think about, let's take each of them separately. If I take in glucose, simple sugars, carbohydrates, I'm going to break them down into simple sugars. What am I going to do with simple sugars? So I don't want you to memorize a diagram. I want you to, in your head, think about what we do with carbohydrates for metabolism.
They store some
Not necessarily. I might use some of them to do what?
energy and then
Yep. So I might utilize some for energy to make ATP. What will I do with the extras? And this is where these pathways come in. So you can make glycogen, and that's where liver comes in. And then if I have even more than that, what am I going to do with the extras?
store in the fat.
Exactly. So that's what I need you to understand. So what am I going to do with my nucleic acids? Yeah. So I'm going to, those little nucleotides are going to be transported to the cells. We might find some inside the nucleus, outside the nucleus, to make DNA and RNA. What am I going to do with my amino acids? And that's what this diagram shows. Right, so we're going to go protein synthesis with those guys, so we'll find them making proteins. Where are proteins in the body? All the plasma membranes have protein components to them. I might need to repair some muscle components. I might need to make some antibodies. So I'm going to take in the post-absorptive state, the building blocks of the materials that I absorbed, and I'm going to put them to use. So that's what you should have a general understanding of. What do I do with all these building? No. No, it depends on how much I have and what reaction has to take place. So I'm not going to get into that. So, but understand the parts and what I would do with them. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good? I'm not going to talk about teddy bears today. Any other specific questions, guys, on what's to come?
I'm trying to focus on one test at a time.
And you guys got all your hints, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I will spank you. All right, so we already went over that. We already talked about that. And again, some of the different hormones that we already discussed in the endocrine system, remember they have secondary functions. So we sometimes define them as having one major thing to do, but they also affect other systems. And I want to bring up the point of insulin. And again, we left off, I think, talking about this last class. But when we look at this diagram, we see that insulin is important to stimulate the uptake of glucose by cells. That's what we seem to give it the most credit for. But it does other things as well. Okay, so it's going to help us utilize those things. It's also if we have to use amino acids in our reaction, it's going to help us do that as well. It's going to stimulate storage of the extra stuff. So when we talk about taking in extra carbohydrates, what do we do with them? Yeah, we store them as fat. So what's that called in this chart? Yeah. Gluconeogenesis, or store as fat would be what?
Lipogenesis.
Correct. Making fat. Okay? So again, some of the second...
Fat from fat.
No, it's making fat from, while using the carbohydrate molecules. So the extra carbohydrates will store as lipids.
As lipids, right. But
Correct.
if we digest more fat than we need, it will be...
Most of the time we get rid of that.
Oh, really?
We will absorb some extras. They will be carried around. Cholesterol might be made from them. Hormones might be made from them. But when we look at having excess adipose, most of the time, and if we look at the components that actually contributed to it, most of it is extra carbohydrate. So, you know, we're brainwashed to think that fat makes us fat. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You know, and I can tell you I went on a wonderful diet when I was younger, and the product Snackwell came out. Remember those? Lovely, delicious little cookies. I gained 20 pounds on the Snackwell diet. So, yeah, no, it's not always fat that makes us fat. It's excess molecules that we're great at doing what with? Yeah, we store it. We store it for a rainy day, especially the easier ones to store, like what? Carbohydrates, exactly.
Maria, do we need to know all the processes which occur? It's a table 24/4, metabolic reactions, metabolic oxidation,
No.
transamination,
Nope.
combination.
No. Okay, so when we talked about proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, these all have to be transported through our systems to the cells so that they can be utilized to do all the building we just discussed. But one of the problems with lipids is they're hydrophobic. So they need an extra little helper to get them to where they need to go, right? They need some sort of protein. These guys are some of the protein components that are going to help carry lipids throughout our system. We already met the chylomicrons. Remember when we discussed lacteals and the lymphatic system, we talked about this little helper, this little carrier coating that was going to help get lipids from the small intestine and into the lymphatic system and eventually into the circulatory system. Some of the other guys involved are the lipoproteins listed in this chart as well. So when we look at these guys, these are actually lipoproteins. And sometimes we refer to them as the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. Is that ringing a bell? You've probably heard of these guys. Some of them get a bad rap. Some of them have a good rap. Yeah. Well, the chylomicron is in that group of carrier proteins, lipoproteins as well. The ones that are familiar to us are HDL, LDL, and VLDL. Exactly. Okay, so when we go to the doctors and we have our...
I do those in my clinic.
Exactly.
I take LD. It depends on whether they're fasting or not fasting. Which scan I do for them.
Correct.
It tells me if they're good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, or total cholesterol.
Correct. So we do a cholesterol level, and that's the actual lipid itself. And then we do something called a triglycerides. So we're going to look at the stored form of lipids that we typically use as animals. And then we also look at these lipoproteins, because we have to have them in certain number to help us transport properly the lipids we have to transport in the circulatory system. Cholesterol, some steroid hormones, some lipid that we absorb from the small intestine. So the book talks about cholesterol transport and some of these molecules. Now, this guy, and I hate to use analogies again. You're going to scream at me again? Okay. Three kids. There's 3 kids. Some that put their toys away and some that leave their toys around. Yes? Trucks. We're going to talk about trucks today. So anyways, the molecules are carrying things and putting them where they belong. The high-density lipoprotein is a higher density molecule. It can physically hold on to what it's transporting better. It brings it to places where it needs to be. HDL brings those molecules to places where they can be altered much more efficiently. That's good. That's my good cholesterol. So most of it is protein, 45 to 50%. And this is just talking about the molecule itself. HDL does a great job of putting lipids, cholesterol, lipid transport, bringing it to places where we need to use it, liver. Yes? These guys are lower density. They're not as able to hold on and transport as much. We find them more made by the liver, in liver regions, and we should have a certain percentage of them because they're actually precursors to making HDL. So we still need them. They're very important. But with respect to transport, they're not as efficient. So when we have them, we have to have them distributed in a certain percentage to be normal and healthy for transport of lipids through our body. What happens when we start to get too many of the lower density lipoproteins, they kind of take over for the low amount of HDL, okay? And what's going to happen is they're going to try and do more transport than they actually should. Well, they drop things in places where they shouldn't. Trying to transport things they really shouldn't be transporting. What I mean by that is, you got it. Leaving your toys in the hallway. Okay. So those molecules, because they're lower density, tend to drop these lipids before they can be transported to where they're supposed to go. And they tend to build up and form what? Plugs, plaques. So you look, when we discussed the cardiovascular system, we talked about atherosclerosis. One of the big contributors or big culprits is high levels of these lower density lipoproteins, dropping things where they don't belong, in places like arteries, can build up.
This book, they use analogy of thumb. You know,
Thumb, yep.
That there's not enough HDL and not enough, like not enough, I would say not enough, but
LDL?
if we will withdrawing blood and we see HDL, let's say like 100, it's good. It's never be enough good. Would be as high as it can be.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be high enough, actually,
Right.
but
It would be hard to do that.
and it's the same analogy with LDL. They say that there's no lowest that can be.
Right.
As low as possible, even like 0, which I don't think will
Yeah,
be
no.
zero, but
Yeah. But it's the VLDL we need to do what? Or no, make who? Yeah, HDL. So it's a precursor. So we need some of that to make the molecules we need. The term rule of thumb means the most accepted rule. Am I explaining that right? When we say it's a rule of thumb, it's something that's everybody accepts as a rule. So it's not an actual rule. It's just kind of an expression.
No, I just
Yeah, no, I wanted to explain that to you, but it's an expression we use. Us wonderful Americans. Okay?
It's good to know.
So that explains our lipoproteins. Again, we call good cholesterol, HDL, high density, higher protein content, more carrying capacity. This table, summary of metabolic functions of the liver. Do not worry. Then on page 940, figure 24.23, some of the roles of important messages being sent from the central nervous system for hypothalamic command of appetite and food intake. One of the problems with the way this all works is it works slow. And what does that mean with respect to consumption of food? Yeah, we usually eat way too much because of the fact that these receptors, these messages that we get with respect to what we call satiety or fullness happen very slowly as food enters the digestive system. So this is just an outline of some of the different things that help to control or inhibit us wanting to or not wanting to eat. Again, very slow. What do you mean energy balance?
No, it's before actually regulation of food intake.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna lead into that. Yeah, I'm gonna lead into that. So because it takes us a while to realize that we've eaten too much, sometimes we eat too much. And on pages 938 and 939, they talk about obesity, regulation of food intake, and that's what this diagram refers to. So when we look at food intake, we have to think intake and output. Why is it we eat? Not just energy, but exactly the building blocks that we need. The amount of energy molecules that we intake a day is going to relate to the amount of energy we produce. So when we intake certain substances, we have to look at output. When we intake too much and output not enough, we're going to do what with the extra? We're going to store it. So their description of your body mass index, or BMI, is something they talk about under obesity. So we as humans have certain standards that have been studied for years and will change because nutrition is a very new science, about what range, weight range we should be in for our body size and our gender. So some of this discussion here talks about energy intake and energy output and how much energy we need to maintain basic metabolic function throughout the day. So according to, my little bracelet here, I need a certain amount of calories a day to just maintain normal body function. Normal body function like breathing. Like my heart has to beat. I have to walk through my environment. We need a certain amount of energy to do that. And everybody has a different number. That energy number is different for all of us. Males tend to get or utilize more energy because males have what? More muscle mass. And muscle needs a lot of energy in order to work itself. So male tends to get more energy numbers than female does. What else takes a lot of energy output? Brain's going to get what it needs to get. It's very greedy. It's going to get what it needs to get. If you don't give yourself enough energy, brain's still going to get what it needs to get, unless you really, really restrict energy input. Then you start to affect brain. I'm not sure what. Oh, what takes a lot of energy? I gotcha. Yeah, distribution of circulatory related to heart muscle. So energy intake and energy output is very important with respect to nutrition. I have to get in enough energy molecules in order to maintain normal base body function. If I'm more active, that's going to increase what? Well, it increases the output, right? And that means the intake has to be a little bit more. Metabolic rate, that's where I was going. So we also hear a term called metabolic rate, and that has to do with the rate at which what? Exactly, the rate at which our chemistry takes place. So not just cellular respiration, but all the other reactions of metabolism that we talked about. So again, I need a certain amount of energy to undergo all those reactions of metabolism. So we can measure, doing some simple calculations that they discuss under obesity on page 939, energy input versus energy output. And that has to do with your weight and your height. So if I have more tissue to take care of, there's going to be more energy than I need to take in to take care of that tissue. Whether that tissue should be there or not, yes? So, BMI. And you can do those calculations for yourself. There's tons of little apps and tons of things on computers. No.
Does metabolism influence, like, digestion? Like how fast things are digested and broken down into their little parts?
You've stumped me. In a way, in a roundabout way, yes. Because when we speed up reactions of metabolism, we need more of the building blocks to undergo the reactions of metabolism. So indirectly, we might speed up the digestive process. But I don't know, we might not. Depends. That's a tough question to answer.
I think it is.
Because it depends on the conditions. It depends on the absorption rate and all of that. Is it going to increase the absorption rate of nutrients?
I think
Maybe.
An active person who's regularly, doing some exercising, going to the gym, whatever they do, running, their digestive system is working faster. About probably.
Well, it's because their muscles are contracting.
Yes.
It's more efficient pushing things through the system.
Even like for me, I just noticed that usually it takes me about maybe less than an hour or 1.5 hours to digest.
Well, to push things out of the stomach and then feel like you need more.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always.
Yeah, because when you move your body, move your muscles, you contract more muscles, including the muscles of your digestive system. So, and again, because you're utilizing more of the nutrients that you put in at a faster rate, those signals that you're going to get more into your system will fire off faster than if you're not using those materials at a faster rate.
How about absorption?
See, that's where I'm stumped. I don't think it's going to increase the absorption rate. Utilization rate is going to increase so that the lack of will come faster, and the signals will come faster to you. So that's
Yeah, I was wondering if you have it moving like too fast.
Yes.
well, that wouldn't be due to exercise. That might be due to some other conditions. So yes, if I move things through the digestive system at too fast a rate, that can be a problem.
It's like diarrhea.
Exactly.
The time to absorb through your intestines.
Correct. But I don't think exercise would move it fast enough to really, really make a big, huge difference. You're going to be more efficient at, You'd consume, yes, exactly. So you'd get these signals coming to you faster, which was what you said. You're gonna move things through at a faster rate because basically peristalsis is happening at a faster rate. You're going to utilize the materials, so your lack of those materials is going to happen at a faster rate. So you're going to get the signals from your nervous system to say, give me more at a faster rate. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But as far as absorption goes, I don't know about that.
Like ill, HA, neurons,
No. No. Just know that the hypothalamus is, with the use of some hormones, and I'm not going to make you memorize which hormones they are, helps to control my hunger and satiety rates. And again, if we look at the chemistry, and this is getting back to what we originally started talking about, is it's a slow process. So when I eat something, there's a couple of things that happen. I send, all these signals we discussed, all these different hormones we discussed will be sent through the system. Some of them are messages that food has entered the system. We also get stretch reflexes from the stomach as well. So when I eat a big meal, if I eat it too fast, that stretch mechanism doesn't kick in. So let's bring Thanksgiving in, because that's coming, right? You sit down to the table and all the wonderful things are there, and of course you have to have a little bit of everything, or a lot of everything, depending on who you are. And, the whole family's eating, so you're eating and eating and eating, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, did you eat too much? Yeah. So that stretch reflex part of all the signals you're getting takes longer than it should. What do they say we should do? And do a lot of what? Chew your food. Why is it important to chew your food? 2 reasons why. A, you're going to squish it up better. So when it hits the gut, you're going to have more efficient breaking down. What else? Those signals to the hypothalamus. You're going to feel those signals. You're going to allow enough time for that brain to realize you're eating.
Right.
Exactly.
I think it's
So twofold.
It's to exercise your TMJ.
Yeah, and I hate when that snaps. But yeah, so it's twofold. It's A, squish up that food so you get better digestion, and B, give time for the signals to be heard, to be realized. Okay, so we won't overeat.
I'm always the last one at my table.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Maria, talk too much.
So understand energy in, energy out. It's important not to overdo energy in versus energy out, because the extra energy is going to be stored, and pretty much going to be stored as fat. That can lead to obesity and a change in BMI, body mass index. Certain,
24.
yep, so we want to be at 20, 25.
24. 25 is considered obese.
Yeah, well, that's also kind of ridiculous.
BMI chart
Yeah.
is overkill.
And I'm hoping, I know, it's ridiculous.
That's why 90% of your doctor's office population is considered obese.
So and don't tell the doctor I said this, but here's Maria's rule of thumb, okay? Because if I was what the doctor's chart said I should be, I would be dragging on the ground and look anorexic, because I have big bones, okay? Can't be that weight. Never was that weight. Even when I was a tiny child, I was never that weight. I skipped over that weight.
Yeah, we're in that way.
I wasn't, exactly. So what should we do?
20, right? Normal is
25, 24,
24 is normal.
up to 24.
And then 25
Anything under is anything under 20,
Anything over 30 is morbidly
under
obese.
20.
correct.
It's
Or obese. Morbidly obese is 100% of your what you should be. So if I should be 150 pounds on that thing, if I am 300 pounds, I'm morbidly obese. Twice your,
if it's under 20, it's
yes.
considered.
Like 18, I think it's 18 is the number, under 18. And again, that's why I don't make you memorize these numbers, because every book is different, Yeah, it is. If you go and look at 3 different nutrition books, you're going to get 3 different,
And those charts, like that,
yeah.
they're all, the weights are fluctuating.
Exactly. And it's because it's a very new science. So be in the ballpark. If if your weight is 25 instead of 24, and you can't possibly, for whatever you're doing, you can't possibly get to that 24, that magic number, then your body's not meant to be there. Exactly. So as long as, what's the rules? Energy input, energy output, right? You want to have healthy input, so you want to follow some sort of food pyramid, my plate, whatever you choose to do, but you want to have the right number of servings of all the different food groups and components. And what's the other key? Exercise. So you want to have adequate physical activity, and don't laugh, but that's important too. Sleep is important, because what do you do during sleep? You do road work, right? Repair. So all of those components are extremely important to have a healthful you. So don't get crazy about that number. You know, if you are way overweight, you know I have to get rid of some pounds. But if you're teetering on those numbers, don't get exactly.
When I was taking a nutrition class this summer, regarding this chart,
She had an amazing teacher too.
I was 18, which is anorexic. It was on summer.
Yep.
So I don't.
Well, it's underweight. It's defined as underweight.
Yes, I'm underweight. Right now, I'm a little more than
Good.
and now I'm normal range. But I think it depends how many muscles. Actually, because I built up some muscles.
Yeah. And it is. And when you're at that borderline, that low, on the low end, that's just as dangerous as the high end sometimes. Exactly. So that's why we have to, you know, and women, you know, if we look at statistics, women tend to be more. No, well, they're not more fat. We have fat in different places. Okay. And we stay exactly.
Or apple.
Yeah. And then different places where we store fat. Again, that's the nutrition class that you're going to take next. But, you know, different places that we store it can also make a difference in our metabolism as well.
What does your bracelet? What you said about your bracelet?
Oh, this I'll explain later what this is. Let's finish this chapter. Holy moly! Okay, so the mechanisms, the regulation of food intake is a slow process. So we have to remember that as humans when we intake our energy molecules, or in other words, when we eat. Let those signals be aware, or let us be aware of those signals. Rising blood glucose, elevated levels of amino acid, concentrations of fatty acids. Those are some of the nutrient signals related to then taking those molecules and doing what with them? Storing them away. And all of those are going to be carried where? So where am I carrying all these molecules for transport throughout the system? Who carries all these? Blood. Thank you very much. So we're constantly, central nervous system and other components, other monitoring components of our systems are monitoring levels of these things. As our glucose levels go up, we might send messages from the central nervous system to who? To take care of it. Rising blood glucose. If you keep saying liver, eventually that's going to be the right answer, but keep going with that. So what happens? Okay, what happens? Blood glucose
Rising.
goes up. Now here's the question, and this is the same question you ask yourself for the endocrine system. What do I do now? I have excess this. What do I have to do with it?
Insulin.
So, rising blood glucose measured by who? Who tells insulin? Yeah, those central brain regions. So we're monitoring blood, and it takes a while for those things to get into blood. So remember, the signals are slow. So exactly. Eat slow to help be more efficient with your digestive process, because the more mechanical digestion you can do in your mouth, the better off you are. But then you'll also get that stretch reflex that you'll actually be aware of before you eat too much. And chewing does that. You know, it's going to help send signals. Remember, I keep saying send signals to the next part of the tube. Well, chewing stuff signals the next part of the tube. And then those hormones that are released in the gastric region, enteroendocrine cells, are going to also send message to the hypothalamus region that you are full. So give time for the message to be heard.
Can you explain high protein content of milk increases and prolongs afferent vagal signal?
Signals for what?
Vagal signal for short-term regulation of food intake.
Right. So we're gonna also increase the digestive contractions. Proteins. What am I going to do with them?
Amino acids.
You know, those break them down into amino acids and then use them to build proteins. So we need a little bit longer to absorb those from the digestive system. That little bit a longer prolonged signal is going to help me absorb those amino acids and deal with them chemically in the system.
But how it relates to short-term regulation? So that will prolong, it means that we need more time.
You know, proteins will actually make us what? If we eat protein in a meal, it's going to make us feel what?
Feel full.
It makes us feel fuller for longer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the short-term reaction is going to, read it again.
It says high protein content of milk increases and prolongs afferent vagal signals. So that will go longer to the brain?
No, the signal to the digestive system is going to go a little bit longer when we have protein in the meal, which will cause, again, me to be able to, for a longer period of time, absorb those nutrients from where? The small intestine, absorb those nutrients and use them. Because we're really conscious about amino acids and proteins. Amino acids and proteins for us is extremely important. And in the digestive process, we want to make sure we're as efficient as possible. So when I take in a high protein meal, I'm going to do that part a little bit longer so that I can get more efficient absorption of those amino acids, and then I can deal with them chemically. So I'm not going to feel hungry as fast because I'm going to do that just a little bit longer to make sure I deal with my amino acids. Am I making sense?
Is that where the whole theory of the ACT diet, is that like a high protein?
Yeah, and that actually takes a lot of energy to do. So when I eat proteins, it takes a lot of energy and I burn a lot of calories to deal with them chemically. So if I'm trying to burn off more energy, the best way to do it is to take in molecules that are going to make me burn more energy to utilize them. So that's kind of the principle of the Atkins diet as well. So because my body's an efficient protein user. Does that make sense? So when I take in those proteins, I'm going to use up more of my stored energy. I'm not going to use those guys to produce energy. And that's where the extra calorie burn goes. But remember, when I burn lipids at too fast a rate, what's the issue? Yeah, those waste products that I then have to deal with as well in the circulatory system. So that's the big issue with a diet like that. And now, on the flip side, there are certain conditions where that diet is more efficient, believe it or not. So there's certain conditions, nervous system, neurological conditions, where it's been shown that those diets are much more efficient for those patients. So it's not all a bad thing. And we're talking about normal metabolism, and it's probably best that you stick to, the certain percentages of the carbohydrate, protein, lipid breakdown. So this little diagram talks about metabolic rate and heat production. Basal metabolic rate, that's the base. That's the rate at which all the reactions need to take place to keep you running. Keep you breathing, keep your heart going, diaphragm contracting, all of that stuff. That's your base rate. Basal metabolic rate. So it changes BMR related to different things like how much of you there is. So the larger your body surface area, the higher your what? Your base metabolic rate is. You need more energy to run your base stuff. So, I'm sorry for the analogy again. If we have a small building versus a large building, and heat consumption. If I have a big, huge house, it's going to cost me more to heat my house than if I have a little house, right? Basal metabolic rate, body surface area. Age and gender. As we get older, because we're not building as much anymore, what are we doing as we get older? No, hopefully not breaking, but we're maintaining. So think about the maintenance. Back to the houses again. When I first build my house, it takes a lot of energy for me to lay the foundations and put the bricks up and put the windows in. But once that's done, what do I do to then maintain? I still have to burn energy to maintain my house, or it's going to fall apart, right? But it doesn't take me nearly as much energy to maintain as it does to build. So as we get older, we're maintaining, not building. So do we need as much energy? No. Gender, male versus female. Males tend to need more energy because they tend to have more muscle mass. Muscles are big consumers of energy. Brain's a big consumer of energy too, but the brain's going to get what it needs, believe me. Stress can mess with BMR as well. Now some of us, when we get stressed out, what do? Eat. See, and some of us, and then I always wished I was the opposite. Unfortunately, I am the first one. Yes, I will eat whatever it is, and don't put your hands in the way, because you might get hurt. Yes. Yeah, oh, yeah, food, yeah. So stress can do a couple of different things to us. Some of the hormones involved there are norepinephrine and epinephrine. And they can mess with medullary hormones, adrenal medulla hormones, and that can rise basal metabolic rate, primarily stimulated by fat catabolism. So some people, when they get stressed out, lose weight, but then some of us compensate for that by eating too much. And then, as we discussed in the endocrine system, another regulator of metabolic rate, the rate at which reactions take place, are hormones. So the thyroid, thyroxine hormone, is going to help regulate the rate at which metabolism takes place. They talk a little bit about hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. Again, when that rate of reaction is way too low or way too high, that can affect our weight as well. And there's a little blurb on that at a closer look on page 942. So metabolic rate is affected by a couple of things. Your base metabolic rate, based on all of those things we just talked about. But I can increase my metabolic rate, the reaction rate time, by doing what? One of the big ones is using more energy at a faster rate. So when I use more energy at a faster rate, I need to what? The reactions are going on at a faster rate. I need to take more energy in. What's the other thing? What takes a lot of energy to do? All of this stuff we were talking, yes, study. No, eat. Because when I take food in, what do I have to do? I got to do all this stuff we talked about in this chapter. That takes a lot of energy. So 2 ways to increase my metabolic rate. Eat, which is my favorite way, and move. So if I want to use more energy than I take in, what do I need to do? And Eat more. One of the hugest problems with people trying to lose weight. They get the move part. I got to go exercise. But you know what happens? If you don't eat enough, what happens? Your body's going to protect you. Guess what's going to happen to your metabolic rate? Whew, in the tank.
That's me.
So you have to eat and you have to move if you want to use the extra energy that you have stored away for a rainy day. Yes? And again, it's not just those two things. Hormones are going to help play a part in that as well. So, heat production versus heat loss. This is a cute little diagram that shows us some of the different mechanisms.
So why thyroxine help us?
It has an effect on metabolic rate. So when it is in low, metabolic rate is low. So when you have hypothyroidism, your base metabolic rate, BMR, is too low.
Yeah.
When thyroxine is on board, it increases your base metabolic rate.
Okay. How it depends, like what do we do or what's happening in the system? Why we don't have enough thyroxine?
You might have abnormal thyroid function. So you might have certain patients just have sluggish or low production thyroids, genetic. Yeah, it could be genetic. It also could be environmental factors that slow down production.
Could it be after pregnancy?
It could. And pregnancy hormones can affect so many different things. So increase or decrease. Hyperthyroidism, people with hyperthyroidism, I always wish I had a little touch of it myself, but unfortunately I don't. But that's an overactive thyroid.
It's not good.
Exactly.
It's actually, they have a lot of nervousness and they very...
Well, and it messes with the hormonal balances in your body of other hormones and metabolism in general. So it's hard when the hormones fluctuate like that. And that's why during pregnancy, and we'll talk about that when we hit that chapter, some of the huge fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone to help maintain pregnancy can affect these metabolic hormones as well.
My cousin, before pregnancy, she was like, I don't know, probably 300 pounds. After she had a baby, now she's probably less than me.
She's running around after that baby.
No, and she didn't exercise. She didn't do
Well,
nothing.
maybe.
Zero. It changed her, whole, system, production of thyroid. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. And sometimes it works in, the opposite way as well. I know. That's a good one.
That's good, but she doesn't look healthy.
Right.
She looks like
And that's why, even though some people are in the normal weight range, they're not healthy people. Exactly. So even though you're in the normal weight range, you always remember that's going to catch up to you someday. Because, well, yeah. But I mean, again, that's why we shouldn't get caught up with the numbers on a chart, because it's important for us to have a well-rounded, healthful life. So even though the numbers on the chart are good, we have to make sure that we keep them that way. We eat healthy, we exercise, and all of those things are in place.
how you feel. If you feel with this weight, you feel good.
Well, sometimes people feel good at a too high a weight too. Like I've been a little complacent at mine for quite some time. Yeah. So, right. And don't get so caught up with those numbers sometimes. If you're doing all of those things and you're living a healthful life.
It's true.
Right? So they talk about temperature because metabolism is going to be giving off what? Heat. So they talk about some of the different mechanisms of dealing with heat. They talk about radiate heat. We radiate some of our heat loss. Males tend to have fat that lives a little bit more to the surface of their skin. There's brown fat and white fat, and they're composed, or different densities, I should say. Brown fat tends to be higher in number in infants and males. That's why I love my husband in the wintertime, when it's cold.
That's true.
Yep, little heat factory, because they tend to radiate, lose more of their extra heat through radiation. Conduction, transfer from, in touch from one to another. Convection, evaporation, that's how we regulate
What's the
too
convection
high.
on,
It's kind of like it's an air movement, cooling, expansion. How do I describe convection?
They have one right there that says warmed air moves away from the body by breezes.
It's
Like
like
if you're
a-
sitting in a hot
it's like
tub, the breeze
evaporative.
goes by and removes the heat from your body.
Right, or heat in, if we're in a room, for example,
So it's a losing
heat.
of heat.
Right, and these are all ways to lose heat. So we might have heat tends to rise higher than the cool, and the air rushes. Thank you. There you
That's
go.
how we feel when we're in an airplane. Always cold. I'm always like freezing.
That's because of the yeah.
Especially my speed. It's just, I don't know. Just,
Well, and then evaporative cooling is really important.
It's, raising those like warm air will raise
It goes to the
up,
top,
right?
but it has to do with the way they move air through a plane too. Yeah, the circulation of that cool, fresh air tends to be cooler. Okay, and then evaporative cooling, very important. Heat has a high vaporization. What do I want to say? Water has a high heat of vaporization. That's what I want to say. So as it goes from a liquid, when I sweat, to a gas, as it evaporates, it's going to pull a lot of heat away with it. So,
Like half marathon, they put that thing on you when you get to the end.
yeah, you don't want to lose
I just
too
ran one
much.
recently and I didn't
Did
know
you?
why they were strapping you in this thing. I didn't
Well, that's why, like, you look at my favorite team, the Celtics. They'll get off the court after run, and boom, they throw their sweatshirt on. It's like, what the heck are they doing? Because if they don't do that, what's going to happen? They're going to get really cold really fast, and that's not good for your body when you're moving quick.
That's why they warm up pitchers
Yeah.
warm.
Well, and that's kind of a it serves two functions. It does serve a physical function, but then it's kind of like that whole mental thing that baseball players go through. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so they talk a little bit too much about heat for some reason, but there we go. And remember that we have to maintain a core body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So eating, increasing metabolism, increasing heat production can contribute to that heat. Too much, we need to get rid of the excess, and that's what this feedback mechanism shows us. They talk a little bit about fever. Fever, higher temperatures, some organisms don't like them, yes? Like bacteria, for example. They like our nice ambient body temperature, and they don't like to get too hot. When they get too hot, what happens to them? They blow up. That's not good. But unfortunately, what happens if your temperature, It depends. There's different kinds of bacteria. So some of them do like, those are thermophilic bacteria. So, yeah. Right. When you go into 99, but there are certain strains of bacteria. Yeah. There's certain strains of bacteria that do like higher temperatures. But typically the ones that are pathogenic to us, like our body temperatures. So when we have fever, get a little higher than that, it's a protection mechanism, getting rid of some nasty little critters that shouldn't be there. Unfortunately, when the temperature starts to go a little bit too high, what happens to us? Well, yeah, nervous system gets affected, but your proteins get affected. Your proteins start to do what? Denature. Very good. They start to unfold. So we have to be careful with fever. Low grade, okay. Too high, not so good. All right. Do you want to go study, or do you want to do some? You want to go study? You want to run away? You want? Don't you want to study for your lab exam?
Yeah.
I won't be in lab today.
Do this anyway.
No.
Paul might throw up all over your
No.
You still have to take